Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the minor pentatonic scale. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 5.20 from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So far we've talked about the major scale in all of its modes. Now I'm going to talk about what's probably the most popular scale for guitarists, and that's the minor pentatonic scale. And the minor pentatonic scale is really popular for guitars because it's easy to learn. The fingerings are easy on the guitar compared to the major scale or to other scales. And it's easy to create licks out of the scale and just sound strong when you're soloing with it. So it's a really good scale to use if you're wanting to dive into soloing. It's one of the first ones you should learn, if not the first one. And it's used heavily in the blues, and actually in the blues they usually play the blues scale, which is just a minor pentatonic with one extra note added, which I'll talk about in an upcoming lesson. But it's also used in all different types of genre: rock, blues, funk, jazz, country, pop. You can pretty much use this scale in most genres. And the intervals of the minor pentatonic scale are root, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. And as you can see, it's only 5 notes. And pentatonic means that there is 5 notes in the scale. So any pentatonic scale is going to consist of 5 notes. And the minor pentatonic scale is the most popular pentatonic scale by far. But there's the major pentatonic scale, which we're going to talk about in the next lesson. And any scale that you create that has 5 notes is a pentatonic scale. So sometimes people refer to the pentatonic scale without saying what pentatonic scale. They're usually referring to minor pentatonic scale because, like I said, it's the most common, most popular. But just saying pentatonic scale isn't good enough because there's all different types of pentatonic scales. So after you notice that there's only 5 notes in this scale, you should notice that the interval distances are bigger than regular major scale or major scale modes. And with the major scale, you have half steps, and your biggest interval distance is a whole step, which is a major second away. In the minor pentatonic scale, you have a minor third interval, so that's bigger than any interval in the major scale or the major scale modes. And your smallest interval is a whole step away, a major second away. And in the major scale, you have half steps away, which are minor seconds. And these groupings of intervals create a really nice sounding scale. And if you play it, you'll be able to recognize it probably right away because it's used so often. And hopefully you notice that the minor pentatonic scale has a minor triad in it, a root, flat 3, 5, and a minor 7 chord. Just add the flat 7 in and you have a minor 7 chord. The only extra note is the 4 or the 11. So because of the minor triad and the minor 7 chord in this scale, you can play this over any of the minor chords from the major scale. So you can play it over any minor triad, you can play it over minor 7th chords, or you can play it over any 2, 3, or 6 chords. And we'll talk about that more in an upcoming lesson. And also with the minor pentatonic scale, which I'm not going to dive in this lesson, we'll talk about that later, is that you can also use it over dominant chords in certain situations. It's done in the blues all the time, in jazz and funk, but we'll talk about that in another series, probably not so much in this lesson because we're talking more stuff that's diatonic to the major scale. So here is the G minor pentatonic scale up and down the whole fretboard. You can see all the root notes are G's and all the intervals correspond to that. You have flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, back to root. And then if we were to break this up into patterns, you would end up with these 5 patterns. Since there's 5 notes, you have 5 patterns, which is another reason it's easy to learn this scale because there's only 5 patterns to learn instead of 7 with the major scale or the major scale modes. You could break the major scale up into less patterns, but the pentatonic scale is truly 5 patterns because there's only 5 notes. And another nice thing about the minor pentatonic scale patterns is that you end up with 2 notes per string, so it's easier to play, so you're not having anything like 3 notes per string or 4 notes per string. If you break it up into 2 notes per string, it's really easy to memorize and finger. So that's the minor pentatonic scale. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to talk about a closely related scale, the major pentatonic scale. And be sure to download the e-guide. All these diagrams are in there. And be sure to subscribe because we had at least one new lesson every day.